Hello. In times of profound uncertainty and global transformation, those who serve as the emotional and practical anchors of society, caregivers, support workers, and community leaders, often carry the heaviest burdens with the least support. In this interview, I speak with Ayesha Iftikhar, a transpersonal practitioner and founder of Tending to the Body and Soul, a conscious community project supported by Alef Trust. Based in Pakistan, Aisha's initiative places the holistic well-being of caregivers at its heart. Through embodied, intuitive, and generative methodologies, the program seeks to cultivate inner resilience, creative expression, and soulful leadership for those who sustain others. This conversation explores the wisdom, the challenges, and the hopes embedded in Aisha's work, and the deeper call to reimagine how we support the supporters of today. A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining me today on this CCI interview, Ayesha.
Thank you so much, Charles. Good morning to you too.
I'm very happy for you to take the time to speak with me today. So can I just start off by asking Ayesha, what was the original motivation or personal experience that inspired you to create Tending to the Body and Soul? And why is this focus on support agents and caregivers?
Right. So this project was really coming from a deeply personal need because I was looking for resources for myself. So I'm in the mental health community and I have run groups and trainings before. And at a particularly challenging time in my life, I started to see what there was available for me to lean into as a way of expansion, relief, and some regulation. What I found was that there were two types of things that were mostly available. There were either these really short form stress reduction kind of workshops or events. It would be a day or two. There would be things like yoga or circles where you could join for some kind of movement practice. And that isn't exactly what I was looking for because I knew that the need for me was not just to go and attend a 2-hour session on breathing or stress reduction. It was more expensive than that. The need was bigger. The other thing I found was very intensive academic courses around, let's say, shadow work. You look at Jungian process, but then there would be these really dense courses that you would have to do, again, very academic as well, or just really brief, 1 or 2 day workshops. And I found that there was a gap there between something that was long enough to make a sustained difference, because what I often found was that when you just dip into something for a week or a weekend or a day or two, it doesn't necessarily lead to long-term change, long-term transformation. And I was looking for that. And at the same time, there was a lot of, if I enrolled in something academic, like let's say I did a 2-year long degree in transpersonal process.
Sorry, carry on, please.
Yeah, so again, enrolling in something like a 2-year long course, academic course, is again not the support that I was looking for. It's more pressure to perform. So what I was finding was that there was this container of maybe a shorter than 2 years, but maybe 4 or 5 months long, a program that would hold people through their journey of healing, of expansion, of developing regulation, of developing integrated practice, and then giving them enough time for them to actually make it a habit, for them to come together in a collective. All of that was really missing in my context and many other places that I looked. So that became part of my personal journey to see, can I then develop, if I'm not finding something like this, can I develop a program like that myself? There might be other people looking for the same thing. But then when the pandemic happened, it became much more clear to me how deeply this was needed. At first, I was coming from mainly my own need, but with the pandemic and the collective uncertainty that happened, across the world,
Yeah.
I found that our support workers, so medical staff, of course, but also teachers, social workers, and my field, mental health workers, everybody was carrying the weight of wider society, their fears, their concerns, and they're always carrying it. And there were high levels of burnout. And then in a place like Pakistan, uh, these professions aren't really supported in any way. There's no real funding for them. There's no real government support. Everybody is just holding up themselves, right? So I found that they're not only some of the most burnt out people, but these are also the people that are trying to give a lot of themselves to others. Yet they're doing it with very empty containers. And as more, systemic and chaotic things happened in my country, politically, socially, economically, I found that further there was no other place for people to lean on other than themselves. So I found myself further looking to develop a program that would help build that resilience, right? It wouldn't be an academic training, it wouldn't be just a brief stress relief, but it would be something that would expand them so that they can hold their work in the middle of all this uncertainty. So that's where it was coming from.
Okay, very powerful. Now, your program centers on embodied, intuitive, and generative approaches. Could you describe how these practices are woven into the work and what they offer traditional models often miss?
Right. I think one of the things that I was conscious of, as I said, was weaving together a variety of things. So embodied, but also transpersonal, and also collective, and also creative. There were many elements that were feeding into it, because I found that even though there's a lot of emphasis on body work now, and like in my field, for
Yes.
instance, working with the nervous system, being polyvagally informed, is really a key modality. It's part of core trauma work that you need to know how to do and how to sustain people. But I find that that piece was incomplete without the transpersonal piece. Even if people are regulating their bodies and attuning to their bodies, which I find was already, we were a bit off track with that because we were mostly working from a place of numbness. But even if that is covered, if that is addressed, um, it's hard to keep functioning when entire systems are beyond your control, right? And then I found that you really needed to, at least from my group and the things we discovered, you needed to lean into that transpersonal anchor. And you needed to understand your struggles from an existential point of view. So then I, brought in a lot of framing around life, around struggles, around cycles, around surrender. We took from Taoism, Buddhist philosophy, we took from Sufi teachings, we looked at various heart-centered practices, we took from, shamanic ideas, um, Jungian alchemical process, right? Stages of the soul. So I found that in addition to the embodied work, we also brought in these various philosophical, existential frameworks for people to look at their journeys.
Yes.
And then there was also, just because this all becomes very heavy and deep work, but we also need elements of play, and we also need elements of creativity to just unleash and express. So that part of it was, included as well through expressive arts and various activities. And the groups have produced a lot of material like poetry and just beautiful artwork around their own expression. So that was also included. So yes, somehow we made it through these connecting points of connecting to the body, working with regulation, working with our energy and boundaries and health, but then also working with these larger frameworks that give you something to hold on to when you're
Yes.
going through these, big systemic struggles, and then fun as well, and then coming together as a community, the collective itself. So I feel like these approaches exist independently, of course, but one of the things that might be an advantage in this, a little of an edge that came together in this work, in this project, was that they came together, right?
Mm.
And I was really grateful that as part of my planning for this, with the grant I had and the project structure, I was given really good time to research and actually plan and make it into a whole course.
Mm.
So I was glad that there was a lot of time given to me to just
Mm.
chew on it and see how to basically simplify and make all that material accessible, you know.
Develop. Yeah. Mm.
Yes. So, I would only, we would have weekly sessions with our group members, but I would have had to do a lot of like background reading and collecting and curating before that, to deliver it in a way that's, here are some really deep concepts, here's some interesting teachings, let's see where we can absorb them, but it has to be done in a very accessible way so that it doesn't become overly heady or, lost in just intellectual abstraction. So I was glad to have the space to do that. And I think that also helped that the concepts were kind of simplified and made accessible to the extent that I could do them.
Great. Aisha, could you share a particular story, moment, or breakthrough from the field that illustrates the kind of transformation this program nurtures?
This is probably the most difficult thing for me to come up with because lots of little things spark off in my mind. I have a few examples where I can see evidence of the shifts this has created. So those include, for instance, that when we checked in with my first cohort that went through this course, their self-care practices had considerably shifted, and they maintained that shift after the course ended. Several months after it ended, they were still keeping up with those practices, which I thought was, really good, because part of it was wanting them to make it a part of their lives. People had sought more health care, so they had addressed long-term health issues that they had either been ignoring. So there was an increase in the amount of medical treatment that a lot of my group members sought as well. So we saw it as, again, that attunement to the body, this ache and backache that you've had for 3 years. People finally went and saw a doctor about it. So it felt like, oh, there's actual self-care, generative self-care happening. People developed their own showcases of their artwork that they never knew they could produce before. So there's like a rich collection of mandalas that somebody made and poetry, and so beautiful examples like that. I think as a group, though, one of the things that stands out to me most is when we took the time to do some grief work. So this was modeled along the dark night of the soul, this really accessing that deep, dark place that we go to, and then mindfully coming together to grieve for that, to grieve for some of our collective traumas that we're holding, some of our cultural traumas, and we realized just how much of it there was. So coming together in these grieving circles, which Francis Weller talks about, that grieving has traditionally always had a place in community. It's been supported by community. It's only lately that it's become isolated and, a kind of one-off thing. But we did some rituals and practices to just connect with that grieving. A process we stayed with for about a few weeks, so 4 to 5 weeks, just on that deep grieving, that connecting, and that releasing. And we learned that some of our grief was very precious to us, so people kept it, right? They had a relationship with it.
Yeah.
So some of the things that I have heard after that was people did experience that as very transformative. When you, as a group, a close-knit group, come together to share with authenticity. And it's very different than from being in therapy, because it was the collective that was doing the healing, and how, it was quite raw. So I think that is a very, very powerful process where I know that it shifted a lot of things for people. So that comes to mind as a really rich part of the work.
Yeah, some very, very powerful and life-changing examples you've given there. And Aisha, how do you see the relationship between body and soul in the context of leadership and resilience, especially in environments facing systemic stress or trauma?
I think that body and soul. So when I think of the soul, I think of the transpersonal, that finding that fabric of existence, connection beyond just ourselves, right? And tapping into that, whether it's through your spirituality, your belief in a higher power, your belief in higher self, your belief in our shared humanity, our interconnectivity, that filters down. Thomas Hubel has this idea of the collective nervous system. Yeah. And I think that filters down to the individual, all the way down into our bodies. So there is that very deep connection from this connecting to the soul broadly, and then your soul and your body specifically. And in terms of resilience and leadership, I've found that people become perhaps more aware of the role they have to play as change agents. I tried to emphasize that. Certainly, they were already change agents, because, one therapist or one educator, one social worker is working with so many other people, and there's a ripple effect. So these are people that have enough to they have enough to give, and they can play a significant role in the lives of many others. So I find that when that is brought home to them, that is emphasized a bit further, and it's treated as a collective process we're all part of, many people do see their own resilience, their own leadership coming in. Many of them have wanted to go and do further projects with their own communities, run their own groups. A couple of others are planning to start a writing circle, and so the expansion has gone out through their systems as well, which is the hope. So I definitely feel, and here's a I don't know if this is directly related to your question, but this is a piece I want to bring in.
Yes, of course.
I think that sometimes with a country like Pakistan, and when we look at projects that are funded in places like this, at least I feel that a lot of them are towards attending to very basic needs, very basic healthcare or very basic primary education. Those are the kind of projects that seem to get a lot of attention, and it's easier to get funding for. This project in particular is not geared at working with people at that just core survival level. It's at working with the people who are in a position to create thriving with our communities, right? So this is where I actually think that, yes, by expanding this container for these people, they're not struggling to eat. So they're not, they have more capacity to then give to the community, right? So by developing them and expanding their container, their resilience, their sense of purpose and commitment to their work, that's what might help us kind of elevate and move forward as a society rather than just keep on subsisting at that level where we're barely keeping up with some basics. I mean, of course, that's needed, but then also we need to be developing on the expansive side, on the thriving side, and not just surviving.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that piece connects for me.
Yeah. Very, very powerful points and work. So with regards to looking ahead, Ayesha, what are your hopes or visions for tending to the body and soul, and how might this work grow or be replicated in other communities facing similar needs?
I think there's a lot of scope for it. And part of my study, I guess, next would be to see how it can be adapted for various contexts. Right now, I'm already seeing the difference between running it in person and running it online, and just the sort of changes you need to make even for that, right? But I think this can be very accessible. A little bit of the barrier might be in actually letting people know what they can get from it, because it's not always immediately clear. You know, I've encountered, for instance, where people wonder, okay, is this a training? Is it a workshop? What am I going to get from this? Right?
Yes.
And it's not until they go through it that they kind of realize what it was for. So I think from a marketing perspective, there's thought that needs to be put into it, that how do you present this work? How do you it is complex, but how do you present it in a way to others that people will want to invest their time and energy into it? Because I do believe that if they invest their time and energy, they do get back something from it.
Yeah,
So that's one piece that, is a point which I'm trying to learn about. I'm not a social media or marketing person at all. So personally, I'm also thinking about how I could possibly get support for that, right? I think the project is at a level where there can be a lot of expansion done, maybe also within my community and internationally, but this is where I would need more of a team and more funding for that. I have had a program assistant with me, but now perhaps needing more people that I would perhaps also train to carry the work forward. So just kind of, I think, needing that sort of boost there in terms of resources. I think that could really help. But in terms of accessibility and connection building and all the learnings we've got just from what the group process can do, I think there's a lot of rich research material as well to share on that. So that's another area that I'd like to lean into, is how to put out into the world what we've already recognized.
Yeah, as a blueprint for education, for compassion, and for training, absolutely. And in these troubled times, it's a skill and a narrative that's desperately needed to be shared across the world with regards to the very, very good work that you're doing. So Ayesha Iftikhar's work reminds us that healing, leadership, and care must begin with the body and the soul of the caregiver. By tending to those who hold space for others, tending to the body and soul offers a quiet yet radical intervention, one that nurtures the roots of transformation rather than only its fruits. In a world where burnout is commonplace and compassion fatigue is rarely addressed, this project speaks to a growing need of people to hold those who hold us. As the conscious community movement continues to grow, projects like this illuminate a path forward, grounded, intuitive, and always deeply human. Ayesha, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future to see how this blueprint is moving forward and how your voice is continuing to reverberate into the most needed corners.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles.
Thank
I
you very
really
much.
appreciate your time. Yeah.